You're contractually obligated to include a picture of Yvon Chouinard anytime brands and sustainability are on the same slide. So we're going to talk more about him and Patagonia later. So here's what we're going to do today. Hello, it's just a little bit about me. So why don't we start there? We're going back a couple of years. This is in 2019, and May 28th of 2019 was a pretty consequential day in the brandscape. And that was the day that the Roseanne show was canceled. Now, it began like any other day with people insulting each other on the internet, and the person doing the insulting that day was Roseanne, and it was in an inflammatory racist tweet aimed at somebody from the Obama administration. And what's interesting about that moment in time is that her show had just been rebooted, and then President Trump had come out vocally in favor of it, talking about its great ratings and how much he approved of it, how much he approved of the show. And so what happened as soon as that tweet was released is that ABC within hours canceled her show. And you can see there's the ABC president and why she did that. Oops. What's interesting to me is how swiftly they did it. So this is an analysis of the term boycott as it's showing up on Twitter over about a 1-year period from January 2018 through January 2019. And you can see all of these spikes around boycotts. Many of them are clustered around brands. Never mind this first one. It was a State of the Union address where a number of prominent Congress people were talking about boycotting the State of the Union. But everything after that, all these spikes you see are brand related. Nike, you can see, you probably remember the Colin Kaepernick ad. Gillette, the video they did on toxic masculinity. Starbucks, 2 Black men were arrested in a Starbucks within like 90 seconds of arriving because they were waiting for a client of theirs. They were realtors, for example. Dick's Sporting Goods pulling AR-15s out of its stores. All of these spiked a boycott. What's interesting is that Roseanne's show was canceled before that boycott even happened. And to me, this was relevant because it's very easy for brands to respond to a social media mob and cancel culture. But what ABC was doing was preempting it. And what that signaled to me is that they had recognized the influence that consumers have through social media on the health of their brands and the way they were perceived. And they were taking it very seriously for the first time. This is some data from Pew. And this is research that they had published regularly up until 2017. I don't know if they have a new survey in the field, but what you can see here is how they graph political polarization. Essentially what this means is that over the last couple of decades, we have become increasingly politically polarized to the point where the parties are getting further and further apart, and it's being harder and harder, to reconcile them. And what that means is that everything is becoming political. So this is why what Roseanne did was so consequential, and what ABC did was so consequential. It ended up being, on her part, a political act as soon as the president waded in. And then when ABC responded, it became a political act as well. And that's really what got my attention, that idea of brands taking a stand in a political arena where they had been reluctant to do that before. So this is why I care about this stuff. I work at Huge's office in Washington, D.C., and I'm a brand strategist. I exist literally at the intersection of brands and politics, literally and figuratively, I guess. And so I'd long been paying attention to the work that brands need to do in order to help businesses succeed. And I'd long been interested in culture, and seeing this come together was really interesting to me. The other thing that is sort of drawing me into this space is I think about, what my career in advertising is. And I would love to be in a world and in an industry and in a position where I could focus on doing good, and I think a lot of us would. The reality is that advertising is at the very black heart of capitalism, sometimes it seems. So the work I'm really doing, despite the occasional, nonprofit opportunity and purpose-related initiative, the work I'm really doing is helping rich white guys keep their mansions in the Hamptons. And so this opportunity to look at the work that brands can do around purpose, as hackneyed as that term is, really struck a chord with me, and it became something I became intensely interested in. And I'm not cynical about it in the way that a lot of other people are. And so I'm trying to show you what I think is the opportunity for brands and for communities that's arising because of this. Here is the worst data viz I've ever created, and it represents my career, and I apologize for that. But I wanted to show you what this path looks like. Huge, I started here almost 9 years ago, and it is my first agency job. And so I had a number of roles before that. I actually began before the internet existed. And so most of my professional career was sort of tracking the internet, and I've been involved with it since its very beginning. At Avon, for example, I was on the team that launched Avon's first e-commerce website. And at Jupiter Media Metrics, which is no longer in existence, we were a competitor to Forrester Research and have since been acquired. My job was to be a research analyst, and that's where I wrote all of those research reports. I worked for the Interactive Advertising Bureau, and then the internet blew up, and I ran my own consulting business for about a decade, working with a lot of marketing technology companies and trade associations before I started at Huge. At the bottom, you can see how I was exposed to different types of strategy within my career. And what's interesting is that I never had a formal strategy title until I got to Huge, and I didn't really know what it was when I got there. I was also one of the first employees in the DC office and the only strategist that we had at the time. And so for that reason, because I didn't know exactly what strategy was, and I wasn't really aware of all of the different flavors, whether it's brand or creative or content or product or business strategy, I sort of did all of it. I was technically hired as a business strategist, but all of the strategy came my way, and I just sort of had to figure it out. And so the way I thought about strategy started to evolve a little bit. You may have heard the term T-shaped candidate or T-shaped strategist. And the idea here is that there's this horizontal layer, right, of everything that a good strategist should be able to do. Things like taking data and observations and forming them into insights, developing a narrative, to the points that you're trying to make, executive persuasion, emotional intelligence, things like that are all things that a strategist has to have, no matter what flavor of strategist you are. The idea of the T-shape is that you've got that horizontal band that makes you sort of functionally fluent, but then you've got this narrow focus of expertise, whether it's brand strategy or product strategy or content strategy or anything else. The other way that I think about it is there's an opportunity for more of what I call a strategy generalist, where yes, you do go deep into one area, maybe not as deep. You're not the world's leading authority in brand strategy, even if you know how to do it, because you don't spend all of your time working on that. You work on some business strategy, or you work on some creative strategy and content strategy as well. And so in my team, we have both types of strategists. We have people who really want to focus on something very, very narrow, and we have other people who want a broader set of experiences and a broader set of skill sets, not just because of the work they're going to be doing now, but because they're thinking about, where do I want to go in the future? I want to be a brand manager, client side, for example. And if all I'm doing is brand strategy and identity, then that's only a very small part of what I might do later in my career. So I want some analytics. I want exposure to research. I want exposure to creative strategy, things like that. And so that generalist path makes a lot of sense for people. Here's me. So I'm largely a brand strategist, but I've also been trained and I've worked as a business strategist, and I can also make my way in creative and social. I'm sort of misrepresenting myself here. I don't go nearly down as deep as that. I kind of consider myself maybe a B minus brand strategist and a B minus C plus business strategist. But because I have sort of this Renaissance approach, I can sort of solve a lot of problems, and I can figure out when I can't solve them and need a specialist to come in. And by the way, this could look at a number of different ways, right? You could be principally a product strategist and have sort of a minor in content strategy and some exposure to brand as well. Or you could come in through analytics, and you necessarily have to understand some business strategy, because as you're building a measurement plan, you have to understand which levers are going to drive specific business outcomes. But you might also pay attention to content strategy, because the technical component in analytics, so you have to understand content structure and things like that. So that's sort of my path into strategy and where I am today. I want to tell you just quickly about Huge. I don't know how familiar people are with Huge. I tell people I work for an advertising agency. That's not true at all. Technically, Huge does integrated marketing. So we are an advertising agency to a point. But more correctly, we think of ourselves as a brand experience agency, or I guess a unified brand experience agency. And that doesn't really exist. And people, look at me like this when I say that to them. So I say I work for an advertising agency because most of my work is in integrated marketing, but we also do a lot of digital product and platform work. We do brand strategy and brand identity, developing logos, developing names, developing positioning and archetypes and all of that. We do a lot of work in experiential and also connected commerce as well. So the way that we think about it is, what's the role of the brand around what the user needs that affects every interaction that that customer can have with the brand, and what it stands for and what it represents. Part of that shows up in integrated marketing. Part of it also shows up in everything else that the brand does. Obligatory logo soup, and you heard some of the other clients that I've worked on as well. We're a pretty big agency. We're about 1,200 people, and we work with some pretty big clients across the world. I'm, like I said, out of the DC office. Our office is part of the Southeast region with Atlanta, and we're about 100 people in those two areas. And our employees are split across those, and also some in between who aren't tethered specifically to an office, and then some people across the country as well. Increasingly, people are sort of far-flung in choosing where they want to live and work, and for the most part, we're fine with that. We've been really flexible because we've learned that we can work just as well remotely as we have in the past. The challenging thing is how to make sure that culture is still consistent, and that is a huge part of what I like about Huge. I'm actually really proud of that place. It is the job that caused me to leave my own business and come work for somebody else again, which is no small thing. And I don't regret it for a minute. I think, the way we treat our people, the way we take care of people, the way we focused in particular over the last year and a half on DE&I and mental health and so many other challenging issues that were thrown our way, as well as technical issues like how do we work remotely. I'm just really proud of the way we handle it. And we're also very good at what we do, whether it's this text activated tampon dispenser you see on the upper left that we built and that won a bunch of awards, or it's a coffee shop that we have on the lower right on the ground floor of our Atlanta office, where we try out all sorts of innovative retail technology experiences. I just think, we're very intentional about where we want to get smart and what impact we want to have. And this was from a pitch we did for a pet care company, but I wanted to include it as well, because I think we can't talk about Huge's culture without talking about pets, who are a big part of our office. Anyway, that's Huge, and I'm happy to talk to more people about it offline if you'd like as well. I want to give you my thoughts about strategy before I dig into sort of the meat of this presentation and talk about, this idea of ally brands and how Brooks plays into that. I heard my talent director say, and he wasn't talking about strategists in particular, so I modified this as well, but I think that he said leader. He was talking about leaders. But the way that I modify this, what he said, is that I believe a good strategist knows what to do when they don't know what to do. That's a huge part of strategy, is that our job is to figure out what the process is going to be, what's the problem that needs to be solved. And I can't underestimate that in particular, because a lot of times clients will come to you with what they think is the problem and what they think is the solution. And it's the job of the strategist to almost act like a 4-year-old and say, well, why? Well, why? Well, why? Until you really get to what the problem is they want to solve. We've had clients who come to us and say, yeah, we've got this really fragmented digital experience with a bunch of different websites, and they think it's a technology problem or it's a user experience problem. But the problem is ultimately that they have 6 different brands with no clear architecture and hierarchy between them. And so bubbling that up and recognizing, look, you've got a brand problem. We can't fix your website architecture until we fix your brand architecture, is part of the job that the strategist has to do, is sort of escalate those asks. When I was interviewing for the job I have now, it was with a boss I had at a previous job at Jupiter. And because I'd never had a strategy job, I wanted to know what it was. What's the job description? And to this day, this is probably the clearest job description for strategy of all flavors that I've ever seen. Use your brain to solve your client's problem. Any narrower than that, and it boxes you in, and it robs you of the ability to be creative. It's funny, you'll take those personality tests and they will say strategy is on one side and creativity is on the other. And I truly believe that the best strategists are off the charts on the creative side, because the way to fashion a good strategy requires a ton of creativity. It is not paint by numbers at all. Almost everything we do is bespoke. And so being able to think creatively and constructively and find new ways to solve problems is a huge part of what we do. And this one is something that I actually said and believe, which is if you're uncertain, if you're even clueless, then you're doing strategy right. The job isn't to find and follow a path, it's to create a new one. I've talked openly about this to my team, and one of the things that I think is really common among strategists is imposter syndrome. And it's for this reason, like you get into a project and your job is to figure out, okay, how do I solve this problem? Like, what are the activities I need to do? Where do I need to get smart? What do I need to pay attention to? What do I not need to pay attention to? And when I started at Huge, I was paralyzed for, I'm not exaggerating. The first 4 weeks, 5 weeks of every project, I was absolutely mystified because I had no idea what I was doing. And I was terrified that someone was going to find out that I don't know how to do my job that I was hired for. This went on for years until I realized that that's part of the job. Like, part of the job is to be uncertain and clueless at the very beginning, because your job is to unravel that and to dispel that cluelessness with a path that you're creating. It's not like you're looking for the place that you need to go. You have to fashion it. And so once I realized that, it became easier to lean into this cluelessness, and you realize, okay, this is natural. This is normal. I'm supposed to feel this way. And that cluelessness is what sparks creativity if you can push aside the anxiety, which is not an easy thing to do. But the other thing that happens is that when you make it through, like when you do find that path, when you do land on that strategy and you figure out, this platform through which a creative idea or a bunch of creative ideas can spring, the way that feels starts to change as well. It felt at first like I dodged a bullet and I found a way through, but the reality is that when you get to that point, you've demonstrated that you know how to do this. It's actually success, it's growth. That's what you were aiming for in the first place. So my current philosophy is that there is this virtuous cycle between, how skilled a strategist is, the kind of strategy or the quality of the strategy they can create, and the quality of the project they can ultimately create. But to me, and different people at the organization are focused on different areas. There's process that are aimed to drive better strategies, and there's client services and other programs that are aimed to drive better projects. I'm super focused on how to create better strategists, because I think when you have better strategists, what happens is that expertise and the runtime and the experience that they have, that's what leads to better strategies. And these strategies are tighter, they're more persuasive, they're more creative, they're more interesting, they're more breakthrough, they're bigger, right? They solve bigger problems with bigger ideas, and they help the client see past the trees for the forest. And that creates influence, and that influence is more likely to turn into projects that actually make it out of PowerPoint and into the real world. And I can't tell you how dispiriting it is to spend weeks or months on a project only for the client to not have the courage, we will often say, to bring it to life. And it's easy to pin that on the client, but it's also part of the strategist's responsibility to right size the idea to what the client's appetite is. So there's a little anthropology and psychology and sociology involved in what we do as well. When you do that, your portfolio gets better, your projects get better, your career progresses, but also you have more fun. Like, it's just much more satisfying to be doing work that you're proud of, that represents your best thinking, than stuff that you had to downsize in order to get it sold through. And the way that I'm focusing on making better strategists is what I call craft coaching, or sometimes called mentoring. And I think there's a big difference between that role and a manager's role. So a manager, we're all familiar with that role, and it's your boss. It's the person who sits above you, and their job is to make sure you're getting on the right projects, that you're thinking about the skills you need to get to the next level, and that they're charting that path for you. And it's usually one person, and it's someone who sticks with you for a long time. And their job is to provide this clarity on how to develop your career. Your craft coach is very different. And I actually think you should have multiple craft coaches. And I like the idea of them varying by project, because different projects require different skills, and a single craft coach might not have all of those. But the difference here is that the craft coach's job is not to sort of guide you. It's not to chart this path and say, okay, follow this. It's that person's job is to sit behind you or below you to say, you know what, try that. And instead of saying, no, no, go the other way, to challenge you. Well, why did you do that? What do you think if we play that forward? What's another way to do that? And it's not to try to get them to pivot. It's not to change their mind. It's to make their idea bigger and make them better. There is no objectively right way to fashion a strategy. And the job of a craft coach is to let people find that path and be able to defend it themselves. It's sort of on the job training. You learn by doing it a lot faster than you do by following instructions and painting by number that somebody else gives you. And so where the manager's job is to be that functional expert in helping you figure out what the next step is in your career, the craft coach's job is to give you the skills you need to get there. And that's something that we're rolling out at Huge right now. I'm super excited about it. And it's something that I've been doing with my team for a couple of years. All right. I'm happy to answer questions on any of that at the end as well. I just want to share a little work, and then I want to talk a little bit about Ally Brands and sustainability. So this is some work that we did for Brooks. We are the agency of record for Brooks, and it's an agency structure where we are the, as I said, the agency of record, and there are a number of other agencies as part of the team who handle media and social and other, in other areas. And we will come up with ideas and cascade them down, and also bring some of their ideas back up and integrate them. So there's a lot of flow in the relationship. And it's really fun because you get to work with an amazing client. Brooks is a fascinating business and a fascinating brand. Very intentional about what they do. And so I want to talk about an initiative called Runfulness, but I want to give you a little bit of background on what Brooks believes and what the brand actually stands for. So their promise is that we create the best running gear, tools, and experiences that move you along your path. They believe that running is a limitless source of positive energy that can transform a day, a life, and even the world. And that leads to this purpose, which is to inspire everyone to run their path to a better self. Now, I say Brooks, we have the tendency to anthropomorphize brands, right? By saying a brand stands for this, or a brand believes that, or a brand does this. A brand can't believe that a run can change the world. A brand can't, stand for something any more than the wind has hopes and dreams. But it's really the people at Brooks. They share this sentiment, this idea of this purpose that brand has sort of galvanizes the culture and the beliefs of the people who work there. It is a culture of runners. Most of the people who work there are runners. The CEO runs every day, every morning before work, because it's part of his ritual. It's not part of his job, might be part of his job, but it's part of who he is, and it helps him understand the brand, and it's what draws him to the brand, and really helps him understand customers as well, and would-be customers. So the project I want to talk to you is about something called the Runfulness Project. This is something that we've been talking to Brooks about for a long time. And the idea here is that there are moments when you run, and if any of you are runners, you may have experienced this. There are different types of runners, but there are some people who run because it's their time to be in their own heads. It's their time to get away from everything. It's not about lowering your splits for some people or on some runs. It's not about losing weight. In some cases, it's just about I'm running because that's where I can be with my thoughts, and that's where ideas come from, and that's where I center myself, right? And what we saw in particular at the beginning of the pandemic is that there were tons more people doing this. We've been talking about Runfulness for a long time, but when all of these new runners emerged at the beginning of COVID for this very reason, it just sort of validated the concept. So we brought it back to Brooks. And we said to them, there's an opportunity here. There's an opportunity to put into words and put into the world what people are experiencing, but maybe aren't articulating it in the way that we know how to. So Runfulness is essentially, it's mindfulness that's unlocked by running, right? It's the effect of a run that's so good and so freeing, it takes your mind to places your feet can't go, where you find Brooks' brand belief, the power to change a day, a life, and the world. And so we really liked this idea, and it's something that we stand for, and it's something that we believed, and we wanted to launch a project around it that was really designed to help people sort of grok what it is they're feeling, right? And so, if Brooks comes to you and says, this thing that you feel when you're running, that's Runfulness, and this is what we believe about it, and doesn't this make sense to you? Does this unlock something for you? And so part of it was just finding a deeper way to connect with people who are experiencing this. But there's also a purposeful element. So and that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to just say this thing that you're experiencing, we get it. We've been getting it for years. Welcome to Runfulness, because that's what we believe is this is all about. And the other part of it is that we established something called the Run Fund. So what this was an initiative that hung off of the Runfulness project. And the idea is, look, you're out running, you're experiencing runfulness. This is where your thinking is happening. This is where your creative juices are flowing. This is where you're taking stock of your place in the world and what you can do to make it better, during the pandemic, which so many of us were doing at so many different moments in our lives. Tell us what they are. What are your ideas? And with the Run Fund, we're going to pick some of these. And we're going to fund them. We're going to fund one up to $100,000, and we're going to fund 4 more ideas up to $25,000. And we're going to turn these ideas into a reality. So this is, what it looked like on Instagram, sort of telegraphs what the initiative was about. Do you have an idea that could help the greater good? Let us know, and we're going to help you turn that idea into a reality. Well, we ran this for a few months and collected a ton of responses. We had a panel of jurists who were looking at all of the ideas and ultimately choosing a winner. And the winner was this initiative called Earth Runs, which is super cool. It's out of the UK. So this was a global initiative for Brooks. But the idea here is that this is when everybody was putting together virtual runs, right? Because nothing was happening in person. And so what Earth Fund did is they started assembling these virtual runs that you would sign up for. There would be a nominal entry fee, and that entry fee would go towards planting trees. Really cool idea. I'll let you read the background here. This is Tasha Akers, who is the founder. They also gave away these really cool medals, which are 100% sustainable. And the medals themselves, instead of being pieces of, of tin or of aluminum that came from someplace far away, they're seed bombs. Like you throw it into your garden, and 3 months later, you've got wildflowers popping up everywhere. So every time you do a run, you get one of these, and you also plant a certain number of trees. What's really cool about this initiative is that it allowed Brooks to get into sustainability in a way that they hadn't been able to previously. So Brooks is uncompromising in the way they approach performance. And they get, the consumer request for sustainable products, and they do everything they can with their supply chain and with their packaging, but they will not make compromises on their product that result in lower performance. And even if you added like hemp laces and recyclable uppers, as soon as you fuse all of that together with a midsole and some sort of a rubber or petroleum-based outsole, that shoe's going in the landfill. There's no way to disassemble it like the top of a pizza box and recycle one part and throw away the other. The shoes just invariably go into the landfill unless they're all completely biodegradable in some way. And so they know that they have to play in sustainability, which they do as much as they can, but they know they can't compete there and they can't win there because of their focus on performance. And so what was great about this is it allowed them to play here a little more forcefully, a little more intentionally, and do something around sustainability that wasn't tied to their product where they just can't do it as well. So that's our segue into sustainability. And what I want to talk about is how we're seeing other brands get into that space, but not just that space. Going back to ABC and Nike and Gillette and some of the other brands that are taking stands on issues that are more controversial than saving the planet, for example, which is hard to disagree with, and what that means for them and why they're doing it and what it means for us, not just as future stewards of brands, but as current and future denizens of this planet and the communities that we live in. So let's talk about sustainability and brands. It is an enormously relevant topic right now. And you can't blame brands for cost jacking it a little bit. There's certainly some of that going on. But part of the reason is that people are increasingly choosing brands and choosing products based on this. And so, no matter what category of retail or what category of business you're looking at, you're finding sustainability initiatives like these. And so what I want to talk about is this framework that we put together for figuring out, well, what are the ways, if you're a brand steward, what are the ways that you can explore sustainability? And the first way is through participation. I'm going to show you a bunch of examples. These aren't our clients. These are just, I think, really interesting examples that help that help demonstrate ways of getting involved. So the first is through participation. Even within participation, there's a range of ways to participate. The lowest rung on this ladder of engagement is awareness. And it's easy to dismiss brands who are just trying to promote awareness of an issue. But the reality is that brands are influencers. At their heart, they are able to reach and interact and persuade thousands, millions of consumers. They're designed expressly to do that. So when a brand gets involved in driving awareness, it's potentially very, very powerful. And I'm less likely to dismiss it as them not doing enough. I would love to see them do more, but there's a role, as you'll see, for awareness as part of this as well. This is an initiative that Cost has done a couple of times. It's super clever. Where it was called Save Our Species. And what they did is they took their alligator logo off a bunch of their shirts. And they replaced it with a similar logo from endangered animals. And then what they did is they only made the number of shirts equivalent to the number of animals left. So there were something like 1,060 mountain gorillas left when they did this initiative. They only made 1,060 mountain gorilla shirts, and they would sell them all. They would sell, each animal would go in a different store, and they would show, as you can see on the right-hand side here, this literature that explained it all. So what was great about this is that they used their store media, which is extremely valuable to drive this initiative forward, as well as all of the other channels they had access to. But they also turned all of their customers into advocates. Every time somebody wears one of these shirts, they can help tell that story. And so I thought that was a really powerful and clever way of them driving this, driving awareness on this issue. Another way we're seeing brands show up is through business model, where somebody will enter the space with an entirely new way of doing it. Allbirds is a great example, right? In contrast to Brooks, where they said, we're not going to focus on performance first. We're going to focus on sustainability first. And then maybe we'll get to the point where we can find a way to create performance through sustainability, which they've then been able to do. They're now offering running shoes. Not the same level of performance, obviously, as Brooks, but coming at it from another angle. There's a lot of companies like Blueland that are finding clever ways of reducing waste in consumer packaged goods. And you can see what they're doing now. And of course, Tesla is a great example of a company that's completely upending the business model. What's interesting to me about these initiatives is that most of them are not going to be dominating their category anytime soon. Allbirds is a tiny fraction of the shoe market. Blueland, you probably have never even heard of. And Tesla, as many Twitter followers as Elon Musk has, is nowhere near the size of Ford or General Motors, despite its market cap. But what is so powerful about brands showing up like this and planting a flag is the competitive response they're soliciting from the bigger brands, and one of them, here's an example, here's GM, where what happens when somebody starts to disrupt your space and offer something sustainable and change the model is that you realize, okay, that's the future, isn't it? I need to start tacking in that direction if I want to hang on to my customers, which is why GM, even though their share was not being threatened yet by brands like Tesla, they announced, look, we're going that same direction too. And for them to say our entire product catalog is going to be electric by 2035 signals that we're a brand that you need to keep paying attention to. And a lot of that was driven by startups like Tesla disrupting the space and getting consumers focused on another aspect. Another way the brands are showing up through participation is by evolving their value proposition. I love this Levi's initiative, where they're getting behind sustainability through this initiative where they say, buy better, wear longer. And the value proposition here, they've partnered with a bunch of influencers who really resonate with Gen Z. This is Jaden Smith. There's Marcus Rashford, who's a professional soccer player. Melody Wisgen, Emma Chamberlain are all people who are known advocates in many cases for sustainability, in some cases through other social justice issues, which are always linked to sustainability in some way. Everything is connected to sustainability. So Levi's value proposition here is, look, stop buying clothes you have to throw away in 6 months. Why shop at H&M? Yeah, you're going to save $20 on a pair of jeans, but we have an iconic brand and we have an iconic style and we have higher quality clothes that you can be proud to wear for longer. And so their value proposition is something you've seen other brands do. Timberland has done this in the past, which essentially is buy our stuff and you don't have to buy as much of our stuff because you can wear it for longer, and that's good for you. And it's not just a better value, it's better for the planet. And so shifting that value proposition and essentially telling people, if you shop our stuff, you don't have to shop as often is very different than come back next month when we drop new styles, And so to shift that is really kind of powerful. So the next way to show up is through commitment. And when I think about commitment, the question is really how much, right? How much are you going in? And the first level there is this sort of conscious commitment. So everybody has a sustainability story to tell. And I've seen brands tell their sustainability story in a way they try to get credit for something that they already did. Well, we switched to LED light bulbs in our building as LEED certified. Okay, you've done that and you found a way to turn that into a sustainability story. So that's something you can say. But then if you move along this continuum, right, then you start to get connected to the issue. Well, okay, well, what can we do around sustainability, right? How can we modify our product line? How can we introduce some new things? How can we reduce waste? How can we retool our supply chain? How can we make different requirements from people who are providing us with packaging or shipping or things like that? What are the other things that we can do here? And then there's this committed phase, which is, okay, we've figured out what we can do, like what sort of aligns with our business practice. What else can we do? Like, what can we do that goes beyond things that are just taking a look at our current operations and figuring out, yeah, we can save here, we can do this here. What more can we do? And here's where we get back to Patagonia and Yvon Chouinard, right? The OG of brands and sustainability. And probably, the benchmark for how to be committed in your commitment. This is just a quick snapshot of how Patagonia shows up in the world. And so you buy something from Patagonia's website and they'll send you emails, but the emails aren't just, here's new fleeces that are coming out in new colors this fall. And this is how much they cost. It's newsletters on sustainability that have no product reference at all, right? You go to their social channels and they're describing themselves as, we're in business to save our home planet. This one at the top, right, from Twitter, if you take a look at the bottom, this is a promoted post. I haven't seen any promoted posts from Patagonia about products. The only stuff they promote are their sustainability stories. They're paying money to tell their sustainability stories, and they're not paying money to try to get people to buy fleeces. And my favorite is job postings, right? This is from Indeed, but this is a job posting for someone to work in one of their stores. And within the job description, it says who you are, like, here's the job description, here are the things we expect you to do. Also, you're an environmental activist. We fully expect you to engage customers and inspire them to get involved. Your job is to participate in the annual local granting process. Your job is to use the company's mission and core values as guides for decision making and act as a brand advocate inside and outside the store. You want to work for us? That's the cost of doing business here. These are the only people we want. And I think that sends a really powerful message. You talk about sort of a nooks and crannies approach. There's no part of the Patagonia ecosystem that you can look at and not be immediately aware of what they stand for as an organization and what they're trying to do. I actually don't think of them as an apparel company. I think of them as an idea on environmental stewardship, currently doing business in the outdoor apparel industry. And so finally, impact. People are not just looking for brands to talk about an issue necessarily or to do something. They're looking for, okay, how is the rubber meeting the road? Like, what impact are you actually having? 2/3 of people believe CEOs should be stepping in when the government does not fix social societal problems because they want these problems solved. That's where the impact comes from. And they think that CEOs should be holding themselves accountable, not just to their board of directors and to their shareholders, but to a broader set of stakeholders, which includes the public and their employees and constituents. This is Chip Bergh, who's the president and CEO of Levi's. And, the way he talks about it, and he talks about this a lot, he feels very strongly that, look, he says, we know we've got a pretty good deal. We know the cards the deck is stacked in favor of corporations and of brands. We know that we pay less taxes, that there are greater loopholes, there are more ways for us to lobby the government and create an environment that's more promising for us. And it's our turn to give something back. We have a moral responsibility, he has said, almost a noblesse oblige, a modern noblesse oblige, to get involved in our communities. But when you think about impact, here's the big change over the way brands are looking at it now, particularly smart brands, than this corporate social responsibility trend from a decade ago. Before it used to be, what can we do that's going to make people like us more, right? What's going to lift our brand favorability and our equity? But now it's about find a problem, figure out how much of that problem you're going to solve and show us how you've solved it. Like, you measure your success not internally against how people like you, but externally on the problem you've taken on. And Timberland's a great example here. They were in the CSR space for a long time. Look, we're Timberland, right? We represent trees, and timber is cutting down trees. We should replant some of those trees because this is the space in which we want our products to be used. They're planting about 500,000 trees a year, which is great. But then they, sharpened their pencils and they took a look at what was happening with climate, and they realized, yeah, if we really want to make a difference, we need to multiply that by 20 every single year. We need to plant 10 million trees a year for 5 years to do anything that's going to have an impact on climate change. Otherwise, it's just lip service to a problem. And that's exactly what they did. There's another really cool example from Converse where they took a look at this 80-ton Pacific garbage patch, right? And they created this virtual store that sits on top of it. And by buying things, real things and virtual things through this virtual store, Converse is raising money to clean up the patch. And they're going to leave the store open until they've raised enough money to actually clean up the patch, and then go ahead and do that and go ahead and clean that up. And so the difference now, where this accountability and this focused on impact at the problem level, not at the brand favorability level, is coming from, is this point right here, right? 2/3 of consumers realize that they have more influence over brands than they do over their elected officials or over the government, right? If brands can make change, that's good for us because we can buy their products or we can not buy their products. We have an opportunity to show them every day how we feel about what they're doing in a way that we don't. And so it's important because if you believe strongly in something, a brand who either supports that same initiative or you can convince to support that same initiative can be an extremely powerful ally because, like I said, that they're influencers and they have all of these resources. And the term we use for those brands or brands that engage in that kind of behavior are ally brands. And we've talked about Colin Kaepernick and Dick's pulling AR-15s. Just a week or two ago, Airbnb launched an initiative to legally protect anybody in Texas, any of their hosts in Texas who were accused under the new, can't remember what it's called, the new law in Texas around abortion, where there's this mercenary component where if somebody was aiding a woman who was getting an abortion, they could be brought under legal scrutiny as well. And Airbnb says, look, if any of our hosts are accused of that, we are going to cover their legal defenses, and we're also going to lobby against this bill. And Lyft has done something similar. So the definition then of ally brands is these are brands that are helping their customers create the societal change that their customers are unable to create themselves. This is some, and I'll show you what some of that looks like. So a couple of years ago, right when a lot of this was happening, this was spiking right at the tail end of the Trump administration. This was from 2019, I believe. We took a look at a lot of initiatives that brands were undertaking that were particularly controversial because they ended up being potentially politicized. Gillette and Dick's Sporting Goods, we've talked about. Patagonia at this time, Patagonia just being Patagonia, but they decided they were going to sue the federal government because the federal government was opening up some national forest lands to privatization, Bears Ears Monument and something else. So they launched an initiative to sue the government, which they had never done before. ABC, we talked about with Roseanne, and there are a number of others on here as well. But what we saw is that this was data just from Twitter, is that the first column shows what's their average number of Twitter mentions before they started these value-driven initiatives. And then how much did it spike? And in some cases, these spikes lasted 2 weeks. Like we measured this this is an average number per day during the period during which it was still, significantly spiking. And, imagine being the brand manager, or imagine being a marketing manager or social media manager at a brand that has taken a stand on something and gets 1,100% lift in social media mentions, or 7,000% lift, or 38,000% lift. I mean, these are brands on adrenaline. And imagine what's happening inside the organization. I actually talked to somebody who was at Gillette when all of this was happening, and he said it was exhilarating and terrifying because people on his team were getting death threats, and some of them had to go into police protection as a result of this. So, it does cut both ways. It creates this huge lift at the time for the brand, but it's not without its consequences to some of the people involved. But we wanted to look at also, so what you see, this big spike, what happens afterwards? Well, what happens afterwards is that almost every single brand that we looked at then was operating at a new higher level. They were getting more they were being mentioned more times for longer periods of time by more different kinds of sources, which I thought was really interesting. Even 4 weeks later, they were just still operating at that new level. And we looked at not just social mentions as part of this study. We looked at what are all of the ways you might be able to take a look at a brand's health as a result of something like this. Are they selling more digitally? Are they mentioned more in the news? We looked at search activity. Are people searching for them more? What's their search discoverability? Are they showing up higher in rankings? And what's their competitive share of voice in news mentions and social media? And what we found in the near term is not surprising, right? You'll see a bunch of spikes in social conversation and news mentions, right, as things are topical. But then that led to a lift in search discoverability as more people, as more organizations are writing about them, the backlinks are increasing. And as they're more relevant, people are more likely to click on backlinks that include mentions of them. The other thing that I thought was really interesting is that not only were they increasing in the absolute sense, but they were also increasing their share of voice. The percentage of the conversation within their industry among their direct competitors was also increasing in the near term. And then we took a look at it again a few months later to see, well, how much did this stick? Absolutely, the social conversation is going to retreat a little bit and the news mentions are going to retreat. But what's interesting is that they didn't fully pull back. And the reason is that we're seeing these news mentions even later on that had nothing to do with the initiatives themselves. It's just that people already have been talking about, for example, Dick's Sporting Goods for months. So when an article comes out talking about supply chain issues in the sporting goods industry, Dick's is a brand that already is culturally relevant and was getting mentions for things like that it hadn't been getting mentions for previously. So all of this suggested a couple of things. First, we saw almost every brand that we looked at, we saw some indication of an increase in brand health metrics as a result of what they were doing. But we also saw nothing that indicated that the brands or that the stewards of the brands thought they had made a mistake. We saw no CMOs or CEOs walk back their position. Nobody radically changed their stance. Nobody make investments or initiatives to counter or to pander to the other side of the conversation. So all of that suggests that what we saw a couple of years ago is that brands were just trying to get their toe in the water here and see if they had, if it was safe for the brand to do that. And for the most part, it was. Whenever I talk about this, there's a cynical thread, right, that runs through, which is, yeah, but aren't they really just, greenwashing or culture jacking? Aren't they just trying to take advantage? Isn't it sort of a mercenary position? I kind of don't care. Like, as a consumer, I kind of don't care what a brand's motivation is. And I can talk a little bit about what some of those motivations are from my perspective. But look, if you care strongly about common sense gun control, and Levi's and Dick's Sporting Goods and Tom's Shoes all launch initiatives to support you, even like Dick's Sporting Goods putting aside millions of dollars a year expressly to lobby Congress in that regard, having nothing to do with its business. Do you care about their motives, or do you just care that you've got some really powerful allies who are helping get the word out and who are helping mobilize and who are helping affect change using channels that they have access to that you don't? I mean, to me, that's pretty powerful. But the other thing about the motives that I'm finding is that, yeah, in some cases, there are brands that say people are super interested in this. We got to find a way to stand for it and do it safely. And there are some cases where brands are saying, look, we need one of those purpose things. And when you push them about that, we're actually working with a big company that's doing exactly this. We really need a purpose. And you ask them why, and it's not to sell more stuff. It's, look, the people who work here, it's important to them. It's important to feel like their work is more meaningful than selling these things that we put in these boxes. And if we have a purpose, and if we can demonstrate that that's our purpose, and that if that eventually flows into the way we do business, that's the new capitalism. That's what people are interested in, particularly in an environment like this, where it's so hard to attract and retain good workers. So the motives I don't care about so much. I think there's a range of them. I think they are getting a little more pure than they were initially. I think what we've seen is that the testing that happened a couple of years ago provides air cover for the stewards of brands to say, you know what, we can have a purpose and it can benefit us, not just externally in the market, but we can make a difference. And it's going to make the people who work here, the communities we serve, customers and employees, feel better about this brand. So, sustainability is all about reusing things. So I'm reusing this graphic in another way to sort of tie this rubric together, where it really creates this virtuous cycle of participation and commitment and impact, right? The more people who are participating, it raises the stakes on what kind of commitment you need to put forward in order to not just play here, but to compete and to win. And, as the stakes are getting higher, if I can do sustainability better than you, oh yeah, well, show me, the impact is going to go up as well. So while it's easy to dismiss brands who are just talking about the issue or aren't doing enough, everything makes a difference. Everything contributes to this cycle, and it's all going to lift as long as the media and as consumers keep paying attention to it, as long as it becomes relevant and brands have a reason to play in this space. That's it. That's the deck, and I'm happy to share it so you can all see it later. And I'm happy to answer. Oh shoot, I didn't leave it a lot of times for questions. But here's the other places you can reach me. Feel free to drop me an email, and that's me on Twitter. And LinkedIn is kind of my platform of choice right now. But let's have some questions. Yeah.
I've got a question. My name's Charles. I'm a second year experience designer. So with the rise of these ally brands taking up these causes that are like inherently political in a lot of senses, like Airbnb decided to take a stance on the abortion laws in Texas, which I think is, a left-leaning. So you see a rise in like brands that are taking the opposite stance and almost like a political war between brands on the left and right.
There have been a few. So there's a brand that we did that we focused on in our study called MyPillow. And the CEO of MyPillow is the staunch Trump supporter who sort of rose to prominence during the Trump administration by being a strong advocate of the president. And their political act was to not boycott a show on Fox News or to not boycott a show on Fox News that a lot of other advertisers were boycotting because of something inflammatory that the host said. And the president praised them for that and made them, sort of this darling brand of the right. There are some others that do the same thing. There's a coffee company called Black Rifle Coffee, which is more of a lifestyle brand, but is very right-leaning in sort of the Second Amendment stance and the position that it has, and and aiming at that lifestyle. So yeah, brands are finding ways to do that on both sides, particularly those that are playing in the lifestyle space. I do agree it's a little more prominent on the left, and I think part of the reason is that the issues, part of it is just economic, right? The issues that brands are taking a stand on in many cases have more support from the left than from the right.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, rolling.
Sorry, I gotta. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, just you, not you once, not you several times.
I had a question about in the beginning of your presentation, you said it was the strategist's job to understand your client's appetite. And as students, we kind of tend to take a lot of big swings So what are some tips to kind of like gauge, besides just like budget, of what your client would be able to take on or like even dare to like put out in the world?
So the biggest one is to not confuse the client as a business with the client as the person who you're working with. It's very easy to look at a Fortune 500 company and say, oh my God, they could totally stomach this huge initiative because they have all the resources for it. Or we've seen these other things that are very brave. It really is understanding. So what's the appetite that the person who you're working with, who's actually making the decision, has for risk? What's their aspiration? What's their ambition? What authority do they have to make a decision? There's a lot of times when somebody will bring you in, to explore an idea or develop a strategy or a concept that where your job is not to bring this into the world, it's to persuade people above them to greenlight it, and understanding that early helps you figure out, how big do we make this idea? Like, do we make this enormous to get people really excited? Or if we make it enormous, is it going to make people really scared? So that's where the psychology and the sociology comes into it as well. Remember that it's people making the decisions.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. And I want to hop in for a quick PSA that we do have time for one more question. So whoever your last question is, that's you.
Great. And everybody, I am so sorry I ran long. But like I said, hit me up on any of these channels. I am happy to respond to anybody with any questions. Unless there aren't any. If I talk that long, I must.
I've got a question.
All right. Hi, Joseph.
Hey, earlier you were talking about kind of like, I loved the dichotomy between the picture of Mother Teresa and then the mansion. I thought that was great. Cause that, it's like such a perfect summation of like a struggle I have. And I'm just curious how you negotiate that, like the desire to do good activism in this world, and then kind of like the more practical day-to-day aspects of what you described as like the black heart of capitalism.
Yeah. So part of the reason I'm so interested in what I call purposeful brand actions is I want to champion them to my clients. I'm not waiting for clients to say, we want to do this really cool thing for the world. I'm looking for every opportunity to tell clients, here's a really cool thing for the world that I think is perfect for you. And I think you should do it. And here's why. And here's the evidence for why it's not going to be bad for you. And here's how it might look in the world. So I want to be proactive about it. That's the work I want to do. And I'm not going to wait for brands to tell me that that's what they want. And there are a lot of ways to do that with startups. But if I can get big brands to play in that space, the lever that they can pull is at an industrial scale. That's where I feel I can make a difference.
Cool.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah, that was an incredible question. And so I want to turn it back to Edmund. Thank you, Mike, as well, for like answering questions and
Of course.
yes, your time. This has been awesome.
Of course.
Yes,
thanks
thank
for
you
having
so
me, everyone.
much. Awesome. Well, if you are a second year who is signed up for a breakout room, I'm going to send you there now. And if you're not,